Howdy, folks. We are back. Happy Tuesday. Sorry for the absence on Monday, but sometimes it's slow in the hockey world, and there's not a lot
You know
to
what,
talk
though?
about.
When we get these absences, though, like we always get the negative meme from Cousin Eddie. Like, it's coming.
Yeah, it's a GIF basically saying this or
It's
like
a gift,
something. But okay, Russ, you had something to start the show with.
I do. So, all right. So how do I frame this? Basically, Coca-Cola has been the official drink of Madison Square Garden since 1910, according to Darren Ravel on Twitter. I was invited to the press conference today, but I had things going, so I didn't go. None of us knew what it was going to be. Just MSG sent out a press release saying they were going to have a new corporate sponsor. So I was like, okay, new structure, whatever. And so it's Pepsi over Coke. Now, I tested it on a few of my New York friends. Now, granted, they're around 29 and up. They're not happy.
Well, and this is the thing. It's because I know that Pepsi is known more for their advertising campaigns than Coke is. Coke is the traditional around Christmas. It's the polar bear, or the we like to see the world. The whole right. Coke, in my estimation, is much more popular than Pepsi has ever been. Is that my imagination, or am I?
I really don't know. I haven't looked at the numbers. I'll try and search that out while we're talking. But here's what I do know. MSG has a lot of concerts and a lot of music. And one of the guests on the panel today, besides like guys like Richter and Graves, was a musician, a singer. And so I think that's what Pepsi has sort of sold MSG on, is the younger crowd, where the music hip sort of soda, where Coke isn't. And if you look at the marketing of it, that is sort of the marketing of it.
I've never been struck that Pepsi was young and hip. I just think it's worse. I mean, I just think it tastes bad.
Well, as of February 2018, CNN Money said Coke was winning the Cola Wars.
Okay.
So usually, and we've seen these Cola Wars happen before.
Right.
When somebody is usually losing market share, they overpurchase or overspend to get that big name. And so, like today on the outside of MSG, how many people are seeing that Pepsi is the official soda? A lot.
Yeah, and I know that like in Toronto, they actually changed the Coca-Cola is the sponsor, the new sponsor of the arena name for the Marlies. It was Ricoh Coliseum, now it's Coca-Cola Coliseum. Yeah. So you obviously know that Coca-Cola is going to be the brand at that arena and at the Scotiabank Arena, or formerly ACC, for the foreseeable future, I would assume. Yeah. But it's weird. I mean, I'll
tell you what's interesting. I think if we did the Pepsi challenge, I could tell you which drink is which, but I don't really have a preference. I don't go out of my way to buy one over the other. I really don't.
I could tell you in about 2 seconds.
Yeah.
I immediately and I won't name the place because I don't want to slam them, but the place when you come to Buffalo that we usually go for subs or wings, that's located near the airport.
Right. Okay.
That we go to, I go in there and I ask for a Coke, and I ask specifically, is it Coke? Is it a Coke product? Is it? Right. And they say, oh, it's Coke, and they give it to me. And then I look at, before looking at the soft drink head that they have there, I taste it and I immediately know it's Pepsi. And I look up and they have Pepsi, Diet Pepsi, and they just wanted to sell. And I will never buy a pop from them anymore because they have Pepsi products. So
yes, I know some people have this great loyalty. I don't. Some people say Pepsi's sweeter. It might be. I just, it's funny. It's like at the end of the day, none of us should be drinking any of it, but we all drink it. We were all brought up on it. It has a good taste with pizza. Like, we're sort of trained to drink it in certain instances in our lives.
It's strictly cola, though, for me. Like I don't have no loyalty. Canada Dry or Schweppes ginger ale's ginger ale.
Okay.
Root beer, for better or for worse.
We just lost 2 potential ginger ale sponsors, but okay.
Right, but root beer, pretty much, they all taste fairly the same. A&W, Mug, they all, it's very. But with cola, there is a distinct difference. So I don't know.
And it's funny. It's like when do I drink soda? When I end up having like a fast food lunch, do I have it in the house? Nah.
Yeah, I just wolfed down a couple cheeseburgers and a pop before the show. So if I pass gas, I'm sorry. I just have to mention this because it became a big deal last night of the game, and the Yankees lose in Tampa, which is always a disgrace because Tampa is a disgrace of a baseball team. But they lost 7-6 last night, and they had bases loaded. And this is like the first, and I haven't been listening to New York radio, but I'm assuming that Aaron Boone is being taken to the cleaners here. They had first and second, nobody out in the top of the ninth, and he bunts with Didi Gregorius to move the runners to second and third.
Mm-hmm.
Giancarlo Stanton, who was 9 for 9 in the last 9 at bats in Tampa in that building.
Right.
And of course, once he bunts, they intentionally walk him. And the next two batters are two struggling right-handed batters against a lefty pitcher, Hicks and Gary Sanchez. Hicks grounds out, no double play. Sanchez, who's hitting below the Mendoza line, hits a ground ball to up the middle. The runner to second base beats it out, and Sanchez still gets thrown out. And they show the replay after, and he dogged it out of the batter's box.
Right.
Now, all of a sudden, and he was taking crap on Twitter last night after the game. All of a sudden this morning, he may have re-aggravated his hamstring injury. That's the one.
I thought groin. I thought I saw groin.
Or groin injury.
Groin.
And I'm like, okay, well, he may not be on the DL, but, that may limit, and to me, this smacks of cover-up. It's like, okay, you know what? Don't cover up your player dogging it. If he dogged it, he dogged it. He should take the heat.
Right. I think the interesting thing is, John Heyman's the one who reported it, may have re-aggravated his groin. Definitely embarrassed himself in the game. And that's the key here. Social media has gotten powerful enough to the point where now teams have to react to it or feel like they have to react to it, even to protect bad behavior from one of their players on the field. And so now the Yankees clearly are doing this. Like, if Gary Sanchez had a bad groin, he wouldn't even have run the ball out. Now, I understand he stopped at some point, but I've seen guys, like Yoenis Cespedes, if you want to talk about an injury plague guy, just not even run, right? Just see the minute that it pulls and not even run. So that's where I get why people aren't going to side on the side of Sanchez. He's also struggling, so now it's a perfect opportunity. If the team wants to sit him for a little bit, like, this is all just to not look bad on social media. It really is.
Yep, and it is one of those things that I think social media brings out the criticism, and there's definitely a little bit of spin going on here, but if you're injured like that, you shouldn't be in the game. And
right. I mean, now granted, he may have felt healthy before he got up, and he may have pulled his groin during that process, right? But I didn't read one person, reporter or otherwise, that felt that was what was happening when they were watching it. Matter of fact, I saw the opposite. They all felt like he's dogging it, and we're going to call him out on it.
Ross, I was shocked that the ground ball goes up the middle. The guy goes to second base. He beats it out. I'm thinking there's no doubt that the guy is already past for. And it was like Dave Kingman was running. It was that he was like 3-4 strides away from first base. And when they showed the replay, he didn't even move until the play happened at second base. And then he all of a sudden turned it on. So
what inning did this happen in?
What's it? Top of the ninth.
Top of the ninth, okay.
Top of the ninth with the tying run on third with 2 outs. I don't care.
Yeah, so you have to believe, even if we want to take his side, Sanchez's, he shouldn't have batted if he had any kind of inkling that his groin was bad, because he knew that this game was so tight, he shouldn't be on the base path, right?
And who was the Dodger player? Was it Bellinger that got called out by his manager for dogging it on the base pads, or it was somebody recently? And
yeah, I think it was Bellinger. I think you're right.
They were gonna, that goes through all sports here. It's like when a player, I mean, this is something that probably could have cost or did cost him a game. So anyway,
well, here's the thing. So David Adler put in a stat cast on Gary Sanchez. Home to first time, 5.39 seconds, sprint speed, 24.4 feet per second. His season averages on max effort runs are 4.53 second home to first and a 25.7 sprint speed. So basically, I think what he's trying to say with the analytics is it wasn't enough of a drop-off to say that it was an injury.
Okay.
You know what I mean? And that's
and
that's look, and again, if a writer is putting that up there, then they believe he was dogging it. Now, here's the other thing, though.
I mean, I think there's no doubt he was dogging it. I think there's no doubt.
Yeah, not to pile on, but Sanchez also had another pass ball. He's got 32 pass balls. The Yankees need to do something about this. Like this guy, he might be able to throw runners out, but he can't catch.
And that's the thing. It's like when I'll bring it back to hockey here. When you have a catcher like Sanchez, who normally will hit in the 280s, hit 30 home runs, you can accept the defensive mistakes. It's sort of like Jake Gardner in hockey. Jake Gardner, when he scores 55 points or 52 points, okay, you can live with the occasional defensive mistake. When he's not scoring, which he didn't in the playoffs, he didn't do as much as he normally did, and he was -5 in Game 7. Then that hurts you. So you need that other side of their game to be able to counterbalance where they're deficient in the other. And obviously Sanchez.
Here's the one thing, and I'm not going to say we never see it, but I was telling somebody this the other day, and then we'll start the show. In hockey, we rarely ever see players dogging it.
Yeah. No, I don't. I mean, if you watched old video of old games that guys used to coast around,
right.
So they don't anymore. It's drilled into their head. We want you for a 45-second shift, and we want you skating balls out, basically. Just skate your ass off.
Whereas with baseball, we see more guys dogging it, and football, definitely we see guys dogging it. Like you see before a play, after the play in the NFL, like there's a lot going on there. So that's the one thing I think hockey has a good foothold on.
Okay. Hello, Hockey World. Today is Tuesday, July 24th, 2018.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
And I'm Michael Agello, and this is the Hockey Buzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. We will not be talking about the Johnny Mansell trade to the Montreal Alouettes. We'll be talking about some signings in the NHL and I consider a dastardly act by the owner of the Carolina Hurricanes and a couple other things. And we'll take your questions in the YouTube chat at some point, probably in the second half of the show. Some signings. Let's start with the one that was the biggest, and we'll be interested to hear what Peter Tessier says when he's back on the show tomorrow. The arbitration went off with Jacob Trouba and the Winnipeg Jets. There was no settlement. The arbitrator decided to cut it right down the middle. The Jets had offered $4 million on a one-year deal. Kurt Overhart, the agent for Trouba, asked for $7 million. It ended up being 1 year at $5.5 million. Russ, what do you think?
Look, I think the Jets got him at a good price, but I also think that will be the last Jets contract he ever signs. And so that's the hard part of this. It's like, yes, you got him and you're bringing him back. Mm-hmm. That's good. Beyond this year, I don't think you can count on Jacob Trouba being in a Jets uniform. That's bad.
Yeah, and I was thinking about this in terms of what does
I'm
this
not saying
mean?
It's 100%, but I'm saying it's like 95%.
Of what this means in terms of like because they're a contender, I don't think they'll trade him in the middle of the year. I don't think they'll trade him at the deadline, but I think they'll trade him at the draft because if he goes into salary arbitration again, which he probably will, and it'll be a 1 year deal, then that 1 year deal leads to unrestricted free agency. And as soon as that happens, they lose leverage and they lose basically a return. This is sort of like the situation with Carlson, which we'll talk about in a minute. But I think that they'll keep him for the year because they got Tyler Myers under contract. They got him under contract. Their defense is adequate or a little better than adequate to make a cup run. But then next year, if they can't get the long-term deal done, and there's nothing to me that indicates they're going to get a long-term deal done because, Overhart's reaction to the arbitration award was to decline to comment. So that they're not happy that they didn't get a long-term deal here. And the only thing I think of is because of their situation now with guys like Kyle Connor and Wheeler and Patrick Laine that they need to all get under new contracts. They really can't afford to pay Trouba what Trouba is asking for.
Right. And so I think you could expect to see Jacob Trouba traded this season, cup hopes or not. I do. I think at this point, if the team were to let him go without assets, they would be scrutinized, highly scrutinized, because, you can make the argument if he's not their best defenseman, he's their number 2 as far as most valuable defenseman. And so you can't let that guy walk without.
No, and I'm not saying that. I think they'll trade him a year out. But the question is how much the difference is that they get in return for him, say during the season this year, and at the draft. Is there a significant difference?
Well, I mean, it all depends on the draft and on the cap, right? So that's the two things that it depends on most. I mean, if it were me, and again, he's at the draft, you're really just trading for his rights.
Right, but he'll be RFA for one more year. He'll get another 1 year.
That's true. He could get another RFA year. So you do have, but you still have to negotiate with him.
Right, and if you're a new team, preferably if you're a new team, you would want to trade for him after the Jets do the dirty work on another arbitration and try to lowball him or try to get
take him this year like the Rangers did with Nemestikov, and then you sign him and don't worry about the arbitration the next year. That's why I think he could get traded this year regardless of how good they are, because I think at the end of the day, if they wait for another arbitration, then that's it for him. You get him this year, you're at least getting him for 2 years, even if he wants to go UFA after that. So I think this is it, though, for Trouba with that team. I do. I have a feeling they tried to work it out. The numbers weren't there.
Yeah.
If I were them, I would definitely try and get the assets. I mean, Logan Stanley's not that far away. Just make a trade at the deadline, get what you can for him. You'll get a lot more at the deadline, I believe.
Yeah, and they're gonna have to get Morrissey locked up on a long-term deal. Now that's the thing. It's like with Morrissey, are they gonna go down the same road as they do with Trouba and go bridge, or are they gonna go long-term? If they go long-term, then you're talking probably paying them, $4.5 to $5 million.
I think they'll go long-term now with Morrissey now because they couldn't with Trouba because he's the next most important defenseman.
Right, and the thing is then basically you're losing Myers, and Myers is probably going to be gone at the end of.
I don't know. I mean, I'm not going to say he's gone yet.
Well, I'm just saying it in terms of cap management. I don't know how. Right. I don't know how they unless they buy out Kulikov, because Kulikov is making over $4 million.
They could buy him.
If they want to make room, and Myers will take a Jack Johnson type of deal to stay in Winnipeg. Not as low as Johnson did, but a long-term deal for less than what people think.
Yeah.
Then maybe it's workable because there will be players that will stay there because that team is a good team and contending. But we'll talk this over more.
Here's another reason I don't think this will get to another arbitration in his final RFA year. You should be paying him $7 million a year anyhow in that arbitration, unless he totally stinks this year, which is not going to happen. You're already paying him 5.5. You're going to be paying him at least 6.5, and then losing him anyhow. You know what I mean? Like there's not a benefit to the team anymore. This year, there's a benefit to the team because you got him at a reasonable rate for what his talent level is.
Now, a couple other signings. One, Joel Edmondson signs a 1-year $3 million deal with the Blues. He avoids arbitration. Now I look at Edmondson, and you look at the Blues situation right now. They have Peter Angelo, they have Parayko locked up long term.
Right.
Bo Meester is a UFA after next year, and he's 34. So this could be just sort of like the 1 year stopgap with Edmondson, and then you sign him long term once Bo Meester is off the books.
I think that's what the plan is.
Yeah, I mean, now the question I have, because Bo Meester is one of the few UFA defensemen for 2019 that hasn't re-signed yet, whether St. Louis is in a posture to maybe trade him at the deadline. I don't think so, because I think they think they're a contending team, so why would they get rid of a veteran guy?
But they have never shied away from a deal. Again, I could see them dealing him too. I can. I mean, I think we're past the point with teams saying, yeah, we'll just let that guy go through the walk year,
Right.
or what could be the walk year on players and not get anything.
Well, they did trade Paul Stastny when they were still in a playoff race, and they made the playoffs. So,
I think that's the new model. I mean, if you look at it, had Stastny played it through, would they have done any better?
Well, I mean, yeah,
honestly, probably not.
It's a $5.4 million cap hit for Bo Meester, and I know there will be teams.
No, but answer that question. Do you think they would have done better or that much better in the playoffs with Stastny before they traded him? They said no.
No, I thought they were a first round exit no matter what.
Right, and they probably felt that way, or at least knew the possibility was there. Right. So
why not get the assets? And that's been my main criticism. Of course, I bring it back to Toronto, but that's been my main criticism of the Leafs last year.
Toronto that hasn't been a player of this ilk.
No, but JVR.
JVR is a big time player, though. He is.
JVR and Bozak. I mean, you would have gotten a bigger return for JVR at the deadline than Buffalo got for Evander Kane. And they would have definitely gotten a first round pick and a top prospect. And they said, okay, we think we can win. So we'll trade a second round pick for Thomas Plekanec. We'll keep Bozak. We'll keep Van Riemsdyk, and you lost to Boston in the first round. I think that was probably the worst move that they didn't make in the Lamoriello Shanahan era. But I understand why they did it. I just think, you've got to be more attuned to asset management. And if you have a player who you're not going to sign who scored 36 goals, you need to move them. And I thought, just like St. Louis moved Stastny, they got a first-round pick, they got a prospect, and maybe you're right. Maybe they trade Bo Meester at the deadline or before the deadline. They only have $1 million in cap space, so they're
gonna trade it just to A, have the cap flexibility, and B, this way they have things sort of settled as far as what assets they're going to get. Again, Bo Meester can bring you a little bit. Like, why would you not do that? Now, I get why the Leafs didn't do it, but I think the Leafs are the oddball here. I think most teams will do what St. Louis did.
The Islanders avoided arbitration on Brock Nelson, a 1 year deal at $4.25 million. He will be a UFA next year. Lou Lamoriello's got a lot of work to do here, Russ. I mean, not only Nelson is a UFA, but also Anders Lee, who scored 40 goals last year, is a UFA as well. Now, he's got the cap space because he didn't re-sign Tavares, or Tavares decided not to re-sign with them. So question is how Lou decides to manage the money that he has.
Well, here's an interesting thing. So we look at this and we say, boy, this is bad. These guys are going UFA. The Islanders are going to lose them. But I don't think the Islanders are going to lose them. This is a weird situation where I think the players will look at it and say, yes, they have plenty of money. There's no John Tavares for them to spend their money. Barzal's really the only other guy to make big money in the next few years.
Right.
They have great management in place and a great coach. If they prove themselves, they will get a fair contract. Will they get the most they can get? No. Because Lou's proved that he's not going to pay you the highest. But I think with everything else the way it is, and since those players have been there all this time, I think there's a good chance they both come back. I think this is the odd reality of the way the Islanders are right now.
Well, the interesting thing is that right now they have their defense, which is not great, but it is what it is. They have their defense locked up for the next, well, all of them next for the next 2 seasons, and most of them for the next 4 to 5. Boychuk, Letty, Hickey, Pulak, Pellick, and Mayfield, and 4 of them are locked up for less than $2.5 million per season. It's at forward. It's Nelson, it's Lee, and it's Jordan Eberle and Filppula and Kovar, the recent signing from the KHL, all UFA. I think they're going to try to do their utmost to keep Nelson and to sign Lee long term, but I think Eberle is a rent-a-player.
I think when you look at, I think the Islanders are going to identify their core players very soon, and I don't think Eberle is going to be in that group. I do think the other 2 are, because they've proven to be good Islanders. The fans like them. Not that they don't like Eberle, but I just think Eberle, for whatever reason now, just always gives you these feeling like you could have gotten more out of him. And it's not because, we're seeing a lack of play or anything else, but I just think people look at Eberle and expect more than what he's given you. And where these other 2 guys, Nelson had an off year last year. Let's be real about that. But the Islanders team was a disaster last year too. Let's be real about that. If he gets back to the 25, 26 goals, they're going to sign him. They're going to sign Lee. They're going to need players, but I don't think they're going to go in deep with Jordan Eberle either.
Yeah, and it's funny because we were, I think, driving to a draft event in Chicago when the Ryan Strome for Eberle deal came over the radio, and I thought that was a great deal. But I also interpreted it as a deal made to sort of placate or to help out Tavares, because they needed to provide a scoring winger. Now that Tavares is gone, I mean, Eberle will get a lot of ice time. He'll probably score a lot of goals, but I think in the end he's a guy that you wait until as long as possible before the deadline, and then you move him and get your young assets back.
It's just a weird thing. Like, he had a good season last year, right? But now there won't be a John Tavares either. So now, are we going to get 59 points, or is he going to go back to 47? And I think that's probably what the Islanders are looking at too. Because if he reverts back to that guy with 47 points, even if he has 20, 25 goals, they're going to be like, you know what? No.
I would put him on a line with Barzal and hope that Barzal sets him up for 35. And if he does, then you maximize your assets. I mean, you get what you can get before the deadline, and if you get a first-round pick and a couple prospects, then you're in good shape. The numbers on Montour just came in from Eric Stevens, a Ducks reporter. $3.25 million for 1 year, 3.525 for the next year, so almost 3.4 for 2 years on a 2-year bridge deal for Montour. Not surprising, because he's a budding talent, and one of the reasons why they could have traded Sami Vatanen to New Jersey is the fact that they had Montour in the pipeline.
Here's what's interesting about this. So if you look at his numbers in the AHL last year before last, he had 32 points in 36 games, right? 13 goals. Last year, and that was with, like I said, 36 games. This year he plays 80 games, has 9 goals, and gets 32 points. So it does show you the difference between the AHL and the NHL, right? And opportunity, because he probably, got a little less power play opportunity on Anaheim, and his goals were, down as a result. But he is a budding star. They got a nice deal here. But again, are they doing the same thing that they did with Cam Fowler, and will they lose in the end?
Right.
Because see, I don't know why you wouldn't have signed him early, long term.
This was the opportunity to get him locked up. If they were prepared to pay him, say, 4.8 on a 6-year deal, pay him more but get him longer, it makes sense. And you're right. They bridged Fowler.
Right.
I think it was a longer bridge than normal 2-year, but they bridged Fowler, and then they ended up having to pay him a whopping sum on the deal, and that forced them to trade Vatanen. Yeah, right. I don't think that their cap management. Now the thing is, they have an endless, bottomless supply of defensemen that keep coming through their chain. I mean,
not these guys, not the Montour types.
No.
Let's
but
be real about that.
but there's they still have Larson coming up, and I'm sure some defenseman who they just drafted who we don't know is how good he is in 2 years will be like, oh my God, this guy's a great defenseman. So they seem to be able to find those good defensemen everywhere. So
yeah.
Okay, let's talk about the story that I wrote about over the weekend, and that was the interesting little speculation from Elliot Friedman of Sportsnet on NHL Network on Friday, and he prefaced this by saying, this is not something that he heard, but it sort of fits with what's going on right now. He says there's a couple teams out there, namely the Maple Leafs and the San Jose Sharks, who have a lot of cap space and who are heavily invested in sort of loading up for this year. I mean, that was the impression with San Jose getting in on the Tavares sweepstakes. Now with San Jose, I mean, they've got Pavelski is a UFA, so you don't know. I'm assuming he's going to re-sign there, but you never know. Thornton's on the last year of his deal, but they have room to move, and they have room to add somebody on a short-term basis. Toronto has $14.7 million in cap space, only William Nylander to sign. And if you look at the defensive landscape, there are not many options out there, but there is a lot of options up front. And the name that has popped up over the last week or so has been Artemi Panarin. And we've talked about him before on the show, but it apparently reached a head in the last week because Jarmo Kekalainen went over to France along with Dan Milstein, Panarin's agent, and it was basically etched in stone that he will not sign a contract with Columbus, and he doesn't want to talk about contract period after the September 13th, which was the beginning of their training camp. So that apparently has kicked Kekalainen in the behind to maybe get some sort of deal done here, or at least listen and to see what offers are out there. And Friedman, I think, is rightly saying that the Leafs have this 1 year window and would be open to adding on, trading a 2 or 3 for 1, trading prospects, trading draft picks to get a player that could really significantly help them. But I don't know whether Panarin makes a lot of sense, Russ.
Yeah, it's a complicated thing. I can tell you Jarmo Kekalainen didn't go to France for the wine and cheese, right? He was hoping to come back with a contract, not with a higher cholesterol. And so that didn't work out. And I don't blame them.
But the brie is really good.
Yeah, the baked brie is always good. But the idea is, I get it, right? Like I could see why that would, have you feeling this way. I just don't think the summer market's robust enough that you're going to get what you hope to get for Panarin. And so why not start the year with him? Like here's basically what I say. And this is what I said on NHL radio this morning. Keep Panarin on the roster, start the season with him, come out of the gate like gangbusters. So you're sort of like renting him too, but then all of a sudden his value is climbing. Keep talking to teams, and when the right deal comes through, then make it. It'll be painful for a little while pulling him from the lineup. But what if you're leading the Metro or close to leading the Metro? At least you got out of the gate so that you could definitely sustain a playoff run. And John Tortorella is a good coach. The one thing Tortorella can do is figure out how not to play with a star player. He did it with Gabrick. So, right?
He was hurt all the time.
No, or didn't want to play him because, he didn't like the way he played.
Well, this is the thing that I don't get, because I like with Panarin probably guaranteed to leave after next year. I don't think the Blue Jackets without Panarin are a contending team. And I don't know how much you benefit from, even if they get to a good start. It's like, this is the thing. It's like players, no matter how good they are, have a certain value on a 1 year window. If it's a team like San Jose, who I think conceivably could sign Panarin to an extension, and maybe this is all bluff and bluster about, September 13th, and if he gets traded to San Jose, middle of the season, he signs an extension, it's completely possible because it meets all the requirements that supposedly he's looking for. Being close to a coast, San Jose right next to San Francisco. I mean, great place to play, great place to live. It would seem to fit. Toronto and other situations, I think, are just purely we're renting you for a year and have a nice time in unrestricted free agency. No team that thinks that does not think they can sign him long term is going to. There's a cap on what they're going to give up.
Yeah, but just remember,
Dallas is not going to give up Heiskanen in a deal for Erik Karlsson because they know Erik Karlsson is not going to sign with them long term.
No, and they won't do it for this either. But there's definitely a few teams out there that will believe they can win a Stanley Cup by adding Artemi Panarin and may not be wrong. Right. He is that good. And so that's where I think this changes that conversation because of how good the player is. But I give you the argument from the Columbus side. Let's say right around the trade deadline, Panarin's doing what he does. He's got, 45
point per game.
Yeah, point per game. He's going to be at around 80 points again. But Milano's got 17 goals, and a few of their other younger players, Dubois already got 20. Let's say those guys start to blossom a little more under Tortorella. Then when you trade him, if you do get a Thomas Hertl, as an example, someone you used, and some draft picks, it cushions the blow a little, but at least you've got a guy now for the next 4 or 5 years where you walk away with nothing because there's still no guarantee Columbus is winning the Stanley Cup, but at least they got something because otherwise you're going to go back and look 2 trades ago and you would have gotten nothing for, this whole Panarin thing. And what did you outlay asset-wise to do it? And that's why I believe they're going to have to get a return here because of the outlay that they did to get the original deal going. So there's an attachment here for that. And so I think that's where you're going to see. And you know what? Look, I mean, they've got Bobrovsky to worry about. Like they're probably, now that they know the Panarin negotiations are bad, they're probably negotiating with Bobrovsky because he's their next most important guy. Like, again, we all like Korpisalo, but he ain't Bobrovsky,
no.
and he may never be. And so if you want to continue, and a team like Columbus, if they lose that goalie, say what you want about John Tortorella, he's an excellent coach. But he also had, like, when he was with the Rangers, had Henrik Lundqvist, so he didn't have to worry about the goaltending. In Tampa, he did have to worry about the goaltending a little bit, and it worked out with Hobby Bullen, and it never worked out again.
Until he got hurt, and then it was in trouble.
Yeah. And who was it, John Graham?
John Graham, yep.
He and John Graham was like oil and water, right? So,
yeah.
Bad.
And God help Columbus if Bobrovsky takes a similar posture to Panarin. I mean, if they're out of luck with both of them, that could be a really bad downturn for that franchise, and I don't want to see that happen. But I do think they have to be proactive, and you have to weigh the benefits of what 1 year means and 1 year of making a playoff run as opposed to what you get and in a deal for a player who is definitely going to walk. Now, there are other situations, and the one I wanted to touch on was Wayne Simmons, and I know we talked about that with you and Anthony and a couple other times too. Van Riemsdyk signs there 5 years, $35 million. Simmons is on the last year of his deal. He's making less than 4. He's probably looking for the big payday. He's 29 years old, and his numbers dipped last year.
Right.
He's a guy, if in a 1 year rental situation, that I think a lot of teams would love. But the thing that's scary about him is asking for a long-term deal with him with the miles on his body, whether anybody is going to sign him long-term.
Well, I think somebody will sign him for 4 years. I think they'll have to move off of, if they want like 5 or 6. But I think someone will sign Simmons for 4. I don't think the Flyers will, though. That's the problem. Mm-hmm. So let's say it doesn't happen. Clearly, he's good in the locker room. They're going to have him go through camp. He's not going to complain. He'll probably never even talk about it. And Hextall certainly is not going to talk about it. He'll answer the question if someone asks him, and he'll say, we're working on it. And that'll be it. Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, though, the Flyers are still going to be a bubble team to make the playoffs. You could add James Van Riemsdyk, but that wasn't their problem. That's not what kept them out of the playoffs. What kept them out of the playoffs was defense and goaltending. Even if I assume that Brian Elliott's really good with goaltending, same thing I said this morning on Sirius, defense still has to be better. Now, Christian Folin, I think, was an upgrade. I do. I think he's an upgrade over Manning, and I think if Gudas actually has his head on straight, Sanheim plays better this year, plays better on the road. He was really good at home. I think, you might be onto something there. But at the end of the day, if they're still in the same spot like, they are last year where – you're pretty sure they're going to make the playoffs. You don't think you're going to get out of the first round. you're going to trade Wayne Simmons because Ron Hextall is not going to let it ride. He's not going to think that he could win the Stanley Cup with Brian Elliott. He knows better.
Yeah, I think the Flyers are 2 years away from being a very.
And he knows that. He knows that. He can't say that, but he knows that. So at the end of the day, knowing that, he is going to trade Wayne Simmons and deal with the momentary blowback of that and surprise because he's been starting the season and riding through the season. But at the end of the day, if he walks away for nothing, fans in this area in Philadelphia and sports talk radio will never, ever, ever let him hear the end of it. And I don't think that's why he makes the deal. I think he makes the deal because I can't think of another time where Ron Hextall let a player go without assets since he's been there.
Yeah. We'll take your questions in a couple minutes. I just wanted to talk about this briefly. It came over Twitter about a couple hours ago. Chuck Caton, who is the Carolina Hurricanes longtime radio broadcaster. I remember listening to Chuck Caton in the Hartford Whalers when I was like trying to listen to games out of town and I couldn't get reception out of Toronto, but for some reason I got reception out of the Hartford station and I would listen to him. A
really nice man.
Really nice man. I've met him. I think I met him last year.
I met him a few times, more than a few.
Yeah, and after 39 seasons, he in negotiations for a new contract, he apparently was lowballed by the ownership of the new ownership of the Hurricanes and Thomas Dundon, and he will not be back as the radio announcer for the Hurricanes. And I honestly, I understand that, there are cost-cutting measures going on in professional sports and in broadcasting. I get that. There was a big to-do yesterday about the Daily News basically eliminating half of their staff and basically being no more. And I understand there's evolution when it comes to, media. But this is the description of what's going on here is that Dundon is doing change for change's sake. He's doing it with the team. He's doing, the rumor is that they're trying to trade Justin Falk and Jeff Skinner because they were part of the old regime. And now they're getting rid of their announcer because he was part of the old regime and they can do a simulcast with the TV broadcast and they can save money. This guy is a billionaire and he's picking fights and doing things for pennies. It's sickening, and I despise what's going on in Carolina and in certain circles of the media, what's going on as well.
Well, here's the thing. I mean, and this is where I think business can be unfair sometimes. But like Don Waddell was quoted in May in the News Observer about this subject, and he said, they haven't made any decisions on it yet. We think it's important to continue to do radio. Radio is not a prudent financial decision. It's important, I think, to have it for the people that still want to listen to it, but it's something from a business standpoint that doesn't make a lot of sense. Now, I'm going to answer all these things in a minute. And it says, we talked to Chuck. There might be some opportunities here if he wants to stay. Right there, I'm going to stop it. So basically, the opportunity for him to stay was to take a pay cut.
Right.
And I understand why he wouldn't do that. And end of the day, I don't care if you're only getting 2,000 people on radio in your area. If you believe that you are going to rebuild this franchise to what it was before when you won a Stanley Cup, then you could lose one more year on radio. Because you're hoping by next year you're such a good team that your radio ratings will again rise. I don't like the simulcast on radio, and I'll tell you why. And it's not because I'm older, and it's also – there's something, and look, I'm in radio. If you want to say that I'm biased about radio, that's fine. But I'm not a trained radio guy. I just like radio for a couple of different reasons. In this portable world that we're in, to say that radio isn't important, I kind of disagree. Just because people aren't holding up transistor radios to their head anymore, there's a lot of people that have the TuneIn Radio app, and there's a lot of other people that listen to broadcasts and podcasts and everything else. That's all radio. You call it whatever you want. But that is what radio is. So to say it's not as important, I think is wrong. I think when you go back and look at what the Islanders did, putting themselves on a college radio station to save money that time, that was a disaster. And the TV broadcast part, there are things that when guys are broadcasting a television game, they don't come out and say, hey, did you see that? but they say it in such a way that when you're on the radio, you don't know what's going on exactly, and you lose some of the finer points. Go listen to Dave Maloney on ESPN Radio for New York, and you'll hear these finer points that I actually appreciate listening on radio that sometimes I would even miss on television, because when I have it on television, maybe the TV camera is not showing me everything. Like there's things like that that make radio valuable.
Well, I mean, I know that in Buffalo they simulcast with Rick Jenneret on TV and radio. That's acceptable because Jenneret still essentially does a radio play-by-play on TV. People are so
he's the oddball for that, yeah.
Right, exactly. And there's definitely a distinction between a television broadcast play-by-play and a radio play-by-play. Radio has to be more descriptive because you obviously can't watch it. And if you listen to Jim Hewson and Craig Simpson on Hockey Night in Canada do a broadcast, and you listen to Joe Bowen and Jim Ralph in Toronto, it's two completely different things. And I won't say which one I prefer, but I think you can guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, it really is meaningless how many people it reaches. What the point here is that, I mean, I can tell you right now, driving back from Marley games, I was listening to Pete Weber doing the Nashville broadcast and Dave Mishkin and Phil Esposito just for humor. But listening to those broadcasts on the radio, and if I would have been listening to the TV broadcast, I wouldn't have been getting the information that I wanted on those games. So I think this is bad, and I think there's a place in every NHL market for a radio broadcast. And if they're going to limit it now to not being on a radio station and just being online, I mean that's a direction I think that's disastrous. But I don't know what they're going to do. And now apparently, like I said, they're going to go to a simulcast. And who is going to listen on the radio when they can watch it on TV? No,
yeah, I'm not sure, but at the end of the day, again, this is corporate 101. I take over a company. I want to put my stamp on it. I start to put my stamp on it by, trading away certain players, signing certain players, and then I take away the faces of the franchise, Ron Francis, and now this. And so when you look at this, that's the part that is just basic corporate America. And we're not used to seeing it in hockey, so it's easy to say we hate it and it doesn't work. I'm not going to say it's not going to work, but I'm going to say in the short term it's going to hurt him. Yeah. And I'm sure they know that. He's a smart businessman. But now, all of a sudden, going into this season, if the Carolina Hurricanes don't start this season on fire, they're going to have some problems with selling tickets.
Yeah, I agree. Let's take some questions from the chat.
Wait, no, we got one more quick subject.
Okay.
So Jack Hughes, who
I'm sorry. Yep, I'm sorry.
We all expect to be the number one pick next year, has just said, and this is very late in the game, because I had been wondering and been dropping hints for weeks, just said that he's going to go to the NTDP for another year and come out of the NTDP for his draft year. The interesting thing about this is, why not? He's already comfortable there. He's still a young guy. He's still 17. So he didn't want to play pro hockey somewhere. That's fine. It's a pretty seamless thing for him to do, and a way to not sort of mess with his head at all. So I get it. What it also does, though, is it has another effect, and that will affect Quinn Hughes now. Because I think Quinn Hughes was hanging on to the hopes that maybe he would go to Michigan and play with his brother. Right. So now Quinn Hughes could go back to the NTDP too, right? I mean, he could.
Yeah, he could.
He's not gonna, because he's already been in Michigan, so he's not going to do that. He would definitely play with them in tournaments.
Sure, or in the World Junior.
Yeah. But now he has a chance to turn pro. And I think he's really close. Like, Quinn Hughes is one of those cases where it really depends on who he plays with and how he dissects the game at the NHL level, which we don't know how he'll do. We have no idea. Until he's doing it, we don't know. Now, I know he's very smart. He's a great skater. That's all great. But if they sign him and he's not quite ready, well, then he's going to play in the AHL. Yeah. And the problem with that is, do you want him getting knocked around in the AHL? Like, that's where the argument for this comes in for Quinn Hughes. And do you sign Quinn Hughes?
Yeah, I think it's college or the Canucks. I wouldn't want to put him down in the AHL. I mean, like
So you think it's, but the problem is, and this is what makes it a complicated situation for Quinn now, and he's going to have to make a quick decision. You can't do one or the minute you sign, you're out of college.
Right. Well, he's got to make the decision for himself, and once he signs, there's no going back. His only recourse, there's no junior team to go play with. It's either you're going to, you're gonna go play with Utica, or play with the Canucks once you sign. But
I go back to the question that I sort of posed there. I mean, there's nothing for Quinn Hughes to learn if he goes back to the NTDP, but if he were to go there to play with his brother, we've never seen anybody go back there, right? Because they usually just go onward and upward. But if he didn't want to play in college and he wants to play with his brother, would he do that? Like, I think it's an interesting thing just to bring up.
Well, I mean, the situation came up with J.D. Greenway, the Leaf draft pick this year, where he was 2 years at Wisconsin, and we still don't know the story, but basically he's gone back to the USHL. And that was sort of a backward step. So I don't know how anxious somebody, especially somebody who was drafted in the top 10, would be to sort of go to a lower level.
Well, you'd only do it if you felt like, hey, I want to hang out a year with my brother. It's the only reason you would do it, because he would dominate the same way his brother would dominate. But the idea is, and I only bring it up just as a fun thinking point, is the NTDP has changed the way they do things. They play against a lot more colleges now. So
right.
You can make the argument that it's not that much of a drop-off talent-wise who he's going to play against if he does that. Now, if he goes to the NHL, is he going too far the other way where it's too much talent? And that's the part that we don't know the answer to.
It's sort of the Billy Bean situation, you could have gone to college for 4 years. Instead you sign with the Mets, you come up and you're not ready and you're ruined. And I'm not saying that the Canucks will do that, but there is some benefit to taking things slow and letting somebody gain strength and developing and maturing. And you Vancouver fans, one way or the other, you're going to see Quinn Hughes because he's probably going to be on Team USA at the World Junior in Vancouver in December and January. So, I think for the better.
Yeah, there's no way the team doesn't lend them, right? It's in their host city. They're going to do it.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think, look, best case scenario is, yes, he gets to sign his pro contract. If he's not having a barn burner season, you let him play the World Juniors in Vancouver. That's probably the plan, but it's all up to Quinn now.
Okay, let's take some questions in the chat to finish out the show. Russ?
All right. Questions in the chat room. Mike asked, would Winnipeg trade Trouba for Athanasiou? I say no.
No way.
So we move on.
Because I think what they're looking for in a Trouba deal is a young, controllable defenseman to replace Trouba. Like if it was Trouba to Tampa Bay, they would want Sergachev.
Yeah.
That's what I'm looking for.
Okay, yeah, I agree. So here's another one, and this one comes from Kyle. If you're Seattle, would you rather take over the current Coyotes roster in the event of a franchise move or go through the expansion draft and start from scratch? You would rather start from scratch because the Coyotes have guys that are close to making big money now, and one of them already is an Ekman Larson. And why would I want to do that when I take over a brand new team and nobody has to make big money for at least 3 years unless I'm signing free agents?
Yeah, but you know what? There is so much good young talent there that I'd be tempted.
I'm not saying it's not tempting, but I still say I would start from scratch.
I'd be tempted with Keller and, Strome and the young guys that they have. I'd be tempted.
I know. I'm just,
And in that way, you avoid the specter of following the Vegas Golden Knights and having to match up to what they did in their first year. If you're taking over, if you're buying the Coyotes, it's just a transfer of a franchise, and you have your own things to match up to, not match up to somebody else who made the Stanley Cup final in their first year.
Yep. So Thomas wants to know, do we see Max Pacioretty getting traded before camp? I'm going to say no.
I'm going to say yes.
You're going to say yes. I don't think so, only because teams are close to being decided now on what's going on with their franchise. They, even Steve Yzerman's going to have a drop dead date for Erik Karlsson to do something this summer because he has to start planning for camp and everything else.
I think it's already there. I mean, and Acker wrote about this. I really think he's saying that Tampa is content with waiting. And then this might just be floated out there to get Ottawa to come off their price tag.
Sure.
But he's saying that there are reports out there that Tampa is prepared to wait for Karlsson until he's a UFA next summer, and that's fine. If they low, and Elliot Friedman said that basically the offer with Tampa that it wasn't very close. So Tampa was essentially offering what it sounds like is the price for a 1-year rental to get Karlsson, and then they would sign him for 8 years. Well, I don't think Ottawa's going to do that. I think Ottawa will, if it's a 1-year rental price with Tampa or a 1-year rental price with Dallas, they'll trade him to Dallas every day, including Sunday. They don't want him, and they want to avoid as much as possible him coming into their building 2 or 3 times a year.
I think a lot of teams are going to have PTOs in camp to offset the potential trades of Karlsson and Pacioretty and guys like that. They'll give other guys a chance to see if they could get some sort of, lightning in a bottle on a 1-year deal. All right, so this one's coming from Mike Doyle. Wants to know if I think there's any truth to the Pens being involved in a rental trade with Ottawa for Karlsson, like Eck reported. I think there may have been truth in them seeking it out. I don't think it will happen.
No, I don't think it will happen because I don't know what young assets that Pittsburgh has that would sway Ottawa for that. I mean, Daniel Sprong is not enough. They don't have a young defenseman that is cheap and under control right now. That there's not a fit there. I mean, there's a fit in terms of Pittsburgh's going for it all the next couple of years while Crosby and Malkin are young, and it'd be great to add Karlsson, but you have to give something the other way, and I don't know what assets Pittsburgh would have to give to Ottawa to get Karlsson. There are other teams out there, San Jose, Dallas, Toronto, other teams that have the young assets that they could trade and the cap space to handle that.
Yeah, I think that's fair. So Hunter asks me a very good one because he wants me to put my reputation on the line just for him. I'll do it this time, Hunter, but don't yeah, okay. Am I looking for any sleepers for the Calder Trophy? Maybe someone from the 2016 or 17 draft years. Kailer Yamamoto would be my sleeper for that because he's still rookie eligible. He could come in there, and would it shock me if he had an Alex DeBrincat kind of year? No, it would not.
No, I think that's good. That's a good one.
Do you have one, Mike, or not off the top of your head?
I'm going chalk right now. I think Dahlin has a really good chance to win.
Yeah. Yeah, Dahlin, yeah, he's just looking for a sleeper. So
I'm not going out on a limb because I don't know what rookies are going to make the teams. There are few of the 2017 draft class that if they make it would have a really great chance, but I don't know whether they're going to make it or not. So
Matt's pointing out that we could have a new Hockey Buzzcast drinking game. Every time I say at the end of the day, you take a shot. Every time Eck forgets the date, you take a shot. He said you don't really need anything else. I tend to agree with him. Yeah.
Nothing for me, and there's no repeatable.
No.
Wow, I take that as
you probably just make people drink in general.
Just by watching me.
Just by watching. Bill C. Will Mike Vecchione see time on the Flyers this year? I mean, he could get called up and down. It is possible because I expect him to come into camp looking really good. But for that bottom 6, I think it's going to be somebody else. Maybe like a Danik Martel or an Aube Cabell, like some people think. But I think Vecchione will be one of those guys that, could see a week to 10 days at a time if there are injuries. So I think there's a possibility of that. And he was pretty good in the playoffs last year. I wanted to see a little more, but it was his first pro season. We have to still remember that. Doesn't matter how old he is. He just left college. He went to that. So this was a big offseason for him. So we'll see. Tom Dusome wants to know how far away is the Nashville rebuild, or players like Frederick Allard and Tolvanen could just fit in. I mean, Tolvanen can just fit in. Allard, I'm not sure.
2 years.
But they're 2 years away, maybe even a year away. Like if Rene doesn't have a good year this year, they're not going to sign him next year. And unless they go out and get a stopgap goalie, if UC Saros is your number one goalie, the rebuild starts. That's my feeling.
Yeah, and I wrote about this for an article that hasn't come out yet. With Ryan, their situation right now is unless they move one of their forwards out, like a Kyle Turris who's making $6 million a year, they really have a dilemma coming up because Ryan Ellis is making 2.5 and is going to be looking for the big payday next summer, and the year after that, Roman Josi, who could be the most underpaid player in the NHL at $4 million, is going to be looking for the big payday, and you're going to be able to pay one of them and not both of them. So if you sign Ellis, then you're probably renting Josi and trading him. And if you sign Josi, or if you determine that you're going to sign Josi, then you're probably trading or letting Ellis go. So that's a bigger dilemma there. And that they have Ekholm and they have Subban and they have Dante Fabro coming along, but those two defensemen, it's going to be tough to get both of them signed.
All right. They did change the rules of the drinking game. Now they added, for your sake, if Prog Rock or Phil Collins is mentioned, you do that.
Okay.
That's fair. One more question.
That Gentle Giant album was great. Never.
Gentle Giant. Geez. I mean, I remember seeing people with like the painted dungaree jackets, denim jackets. When I was a kid, I had a Yes one. Other people, you went to like this burnout guy who would paint them for you, right? Because it was never you. And I think at the time the going rate for like a painted jacket was like $20, $25, and you hoped you didn't F up your jacket. But I remember seeing some Gentle Giant, and I just never, ever, ever could listen to them.
Yeah, one or two songs, and then it wasn't my cup of tea. Like, continue.
Right. Last one from Matt. This is an interesting one. He said, does anybody else feel like there's a rebrand for the Panthers as the Miami Panthers would be so much better for marketing the team, selling the interstate rivalry, etc.? I think he's right. I think they should go Miami Panthers. I think
there's only one problem. They're not in Miami.
So what? So the New York Jets are not in New York either. What's the point?
Yeah, but I mean, it's
the Atlanta Braves are not in Atlanta. Like
the Sunrise Panthers. I mean,
no, but I think the Miami Panthers make sense. I think you could bridge the gap with that and maybe start to build something better. I think Florida Panthers is sort of like teetering.
Well, here's the new brand of the Florida Panthers. It's called the Quebec Nordiques.
That's not nice.
Yeah. All right.
Now Kay Zacher says, if I say here's the thing, you do a drink too. And every time Kevin Allen says bullish, you do a drink. They're all right. I mean, I can't lie on any of them.
Okay.
It's true.
I'll make sure to reference some King Crimson albums tomorrow.
For those of you drinking.
For those of you drinking. For Russ Cohen, I'm Michael Agello. Thank you for watching. And remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.